Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Greve-Lazian, coming up in today's newscast. Protesters throughout the country blocked roads and took to the streets in a day of disruption against the government's planned judicial reforms. And amid the ongoing protests, Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu and his wife Sara fly to Rome for an official state visit. And beloved actor Chaim Topol, known for his role in Fiddler on the Roof, passes away at the age of 87. The protest movement against the government's planned judicial overhaul Thursday conducted its second major day-long attempt to disrupt life in Israel. During the course of the day, Israelis took part in protest against the reforms. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The so-called Day of Resistance may be the biggest and certainly most disruptive day since protests began 10 weeks ago. Protests were held from the northern border to Eilat in the south. It's included teachers and parents with school children, industrial and high-tech workers, army reservists, and the handicapped. The goal is to disrupt normal life in the nation to protest the judicial reform package making its way through the Knesset Law Committee.
What are we doing? It's pretty clear from what you see here. We're just protesting. We're making a fun day. It's the end of democracy, but why not have fun with it, right? So, you're most welcome to join us. We're just marching and chanting a bit. Pretty fun, really.
There were disruptions in traffic, train service, and Ben Gurion International Airport was also affected. There were even attempts to block traffic around the airport to block the flight of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife Sara, who are planning a long weekend official visit in Rome. Today's protests also included rallies outside the homes of top political leaders in the coalition. Protests took form with a dedicated website and map indicating hundreds of demonstrations in locations around the country. There's even a detailed map with planned protests.
Here for one word, democracy, freedom, that's all.
So I'm Yara, I'm 22 years old, I'm from Tel Aviv. I've been protesting for the past, 9 weeks. This country is going to doom. There's no equality, there's no freedom for anyone. It's just for show right now. We've been protesting with the color pink because it symbols faith and equality and care for women and for LGBTQ. And we just want to live here safely with equality.
Police deployed 3,000 extra cops around the country with the job of minimizing disruptions to daily life. They also issued a warning that drivers intentionally causing traffic blockages would be fined 500 shekels. The protests are expected to continue well into the night.
And earlier today, we spoke with ILTV reporter Steve Leibovitz, who was out on the streets along with the protesters in Jerusalem. So, Steve, what is the atmosphere like today out in the country?
Well, Lidar, it really depends on which intersection you're at and at which hour. Right now, we're at one of the protest spots, and traffic is moving fine towards Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. But as you know, even anchor women at ILTV and the Prime Minister of Israel had to change their plans today because these disruptions are going to go on from the north of the country, from the northern border all the way down to Eilat. It's going to be in hundreds of locations. I would say tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of protesters will take part, but everyone in the country is impacted in that they have to change or arrange travel plans to get certain places at certain times based on where the disruptions may or may not take place.
And we've seen an unprecedented number of IDF reservists taking part in the protest today, something that is very concerning. I mean, what exactly is their role in the demonstrations today?
Yes, Lidar, many reservists are taking part in these protests today, maybe more than ever before, because of a lot of the things that were reported in the media indicating really degrading the reservists and putting them down, even words of ministers in the Israeli government, and they're very upset about it. Even people that have never been to protests of any kind on either side of the political spectrum are very concerned about the way reservists have been spoken about, those that have decided to protest, including the pilots who are volunteers and don't really have to serve if they don't want to. So I would say that there is also quite a number of voices out there warning that the red line of reservists refusing service is one that we should never cross. Israel's security is at stake.
All right, Steve Leibovitz, thank you for taking the time to speak with us out on the streets today. And back to the studio. Joining us now with more on the day of disruption and the judicial reform is Executive Director of Honest Reporting and former Jerusalem Post political analyst Gail Hoffman. Gail, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure being with you, Lidar.
So we saw quite a day of disruption today with events still taking place. How would you summarize the day?
That the protesters are getting more and more intense. They tried to stop Netanyahu unsuccessfully from leaving to Italy. He had to go by helicopter. He had to meet with the Defense Secretary of the United States in the airport because the Defense Secretary couldn't leave the airport. That is certainly having an impact as Netanyahu goes to Italy. And when he's in Italy, who's going to allow him to leave and come back here? He doesn't have the police under the control of Itamar Ben-Gvir over there.
Absolutely. We've been seeing disruptions all day, major roads being blocked. And now in the Knesset, the legislation for the judicial overhaul is still moving forward. But, you know, there are many reports this week of a compromise taking shape. I mean, what can you tell us about this?
Well, it was always clear that the compromise would only happen at the last minute. And we're getting there, Lidar. 3 weeks from today is when the Knesset leaves for its Passover recess. Journalists and politicians have in common that they don't do anything until the last minute. And there's many proposals out there. There are several under the control of the president. Some have been leaked to the press, some have not yet. There's the different initiative led by former Justice Minister Friedman. In the end, one of these compromises is going to end up being enacted into law, not what's been proposed and not what's been legislated and not what has been passed in the readings of the Knesset Law Committee and the plenum. Ignore, and the world media have been doing this, ignore everything that's passed until now, because that's not what's going to end up happening.
So you're saying what's happening inside the Knesset at the moment, what we're seeing now is not what we're going to see in 3 weeks from now. I mean, the coalition has repeatedly called on the opposition to sit down and negotiate, though something that the opposition, at least publicly, is refusing to do. I mean, so what should we expect to see with regards to the reforms and to the legislation in the coming week? I mean, are we going to see opposition and coalition members sitting together, or is this all going to happen behind the scenes?
So far, it's been behind the scenes, and so far the opposition has been represented by professors and others who don't necessarily represent them. The coalition speaks with one voice because it's the Prime Minister and the Justice Minister who are in charge, clearly, whereas with the opposition, they've got so many different points of view, and a lot of leaders don't even want to talk in any way to Netanyahu. So it's unclear whether they can be involved at all. It might end up being that the coalition will make compromises with itself.
Which is essentially, I mean, what we are seeing today, is that not so? I mean, I think Simcha Rotman, one of the, who's pushing forward this reform, has said that he's essentially compromising with himself and with Justice Minister Yariv Levin.
And that is what could end up happening if the president doesn't put more of his weight behind this. So far, the president has said that various proposals that have been leaked, including from his own talks, are not the final version, and time is running out. The president would have to put his weight on both sides for there to be the kind of compromise proposal that both sides can stand by and pass into law.
Now, I want to touch upon another, I think, very worrying phenomenon that we're seeing with these protests, and that's the announcement of IDF reservists that say that they're going to boycott service should the reforms pass. I mean, what voices are we hearing from the reservists today and from the Army as well?
The various Air Force pilots met with their commander. It's been happening in unit after unit where they've been saying that they don't want to serve a dictatorship. and they will not come out for, at least for training, when it would help a government that's passing proposals that they don't believe in. But it has not yet gotten to the point where they're refusing to take part in actual action. I mean, there have been various reports of Israel involved in attacks in Syria, in Iran in recent days, and reservists tend to be involved in such strikes if Israel did it. So at time still, where they are still waiting to see what's going to pass and be final. But the threats are very serious, and there's no doubt that Netanyahu, at least, is taking them into account. Yariv Levin and Rothman, I'm not so sure.
Now, I want to head overseas for a moment because we've also just had an opinion piece in the New York Times by Thomas Friedman calling on American Jews to choose sides over Israel. I mean, quite a statement. What do you make of this?
So first of all, the idea that American Jews can have an opinion about Israel, which used to be controversial, is no longer so. Israel needs diaspora Jews to care about what's happening over here. And if that means being on one side or another, that's totally fair. But what Tom Friedman is asking American Jews to do is to choose one side and basically punish Israel if it takes steps that it doesn't like. And that's not the way a family acts to a member of their family. Diaspora Jews and Israel, we are part of one family. And Tom Friedman, not for the first time, is asking for action to be taken against Israel. He's more than a journalist. He's an activist who is the ear of the President of the United States and the leader of the American Jewish community. And that's why what he writes is so dangerous. And that's why we at Honest Reporting need to highlight this and make sure that the world hears the truth.
Absolutely. All right. Gail Hoffman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Lidar.